Welcome to Ray's Toolbox. On vacation, we've spent a couple of different years down on the beach, enjoying the views in the sand and everything. And it was always nice to walk along the beach and pick up some shells with the kids and the grandkids. And I thought instead of bringing them home and leaving them in a jar to sit on the shelf, I thought I'd put them in a clock for each one of them. I decided to make a mantel clock for each one of them. So first I needed to take a big piece of melamine here, and in order for epoxy not to stick to it, I took some plastic tape and covered the top of it with. You may be able to see, before I put the tape on, I did go ahead and draw out some squares on the melamine itself. That way I knew about how big to make each clock, give myself a guideline to go with. To get the shape I wanted, I found a plastic bucket that had just about the right arc to it. That's what I used to make both the top arc and then the sides where it kind of flutes out to the sides. I also used the same bucket to get that effect. I needed something to make the mold out of, the form, so I went to the lumber yard and found some white fluted polypropylene, I think is how you say that. Basically it's plastic cardboard is what it looks like, but it works really good to cut into shape, and it will form around the arc that I built. I cut it into 2-inch strips that would make it plenty deep enough or tall enough for the form. For the base of the clock, I just cut a piece of 1x pine, made it about 2 inches long, or wide I should say, and about 12 inches long. I laid out 9 different clocks on my wood. Then I formed them out, took the plastic and formed them into the shape that I wanted, and then hot glued them down to the surface. Wasn't sure what kind of pressure I would have on the sides, so I did glue some little blocks on the outsides of the form. I had 2 or 3 ideas on how I wanted to make the clocks. 3 of the clocks I made a round piece of wood. I believe this is about 8 inches in diameter, and put them down first. After I double checked, made sure everything looked like it wasn't going to leak, it was time to start my first epoxy pour. I wanted to make a beach scene for my clocks, with a beach down toward the bottom and the ocean, of course, toward the top. The first thing I did was pour a very thin layer of epoxy on the bottom of the form. It wasn't very thick, but just enough to get the mold, the form, sealed down to the wood. I wanted to make sure I did not have any leaks. There's a lot of good videos out there to show you how to mix up epoxy. Most of them have one thing in common. When you mix the epoxy, you get a lot of air bubbles. So if you take a heat gun or a small torch across the top quickly so you don't burn it, it does a really good job at popping all the bubbles that rise to the surface. You have to do this a few times to get them all out. My 3 clocks with my wood backings that I put in, as you saw, I had to weight those down until the epoxy set up. otherwise they kind of floated to the top. Most of the coats of epoxy on top of this is going to be clear so you can see through it. So I added some spray paint to try to get some color onto the ocean, if you will. The bottom of it, I used a darker sand color paint to give that effect. Couple different colors of blue, with the darker blue being on the top of the clock or out toward the ocean more, if you will. Lighter blue up toward the shore. I definitely made some of them different as far as comparing them to each other. So they have a slightly different color schemes, different layers to each of them. Each layer of epoxy had to dry before you started with the next color. But when you use two different colors, light blue, dark blue, there's different techniques you can use to blend them together. And I don't think it came out too bad, actually. I started with the torch to pop the bubbles, and realized I have a plastic form, so the heat gun works just as good as getting the bubbles out. Next, I started to make the beach. I put the sand down in place, mixed a little bit of rocks from an aquarium, and put the shells down. Tried to make it look as natural as I could. After that step had dried, it's time to go with my first layer of water. So dark blue out to the ocean, light blue toward the shore, and clear up on the beach. After this layer was in, I took the craft stick and kind of blended the three different shades together. To make the waves, I started with some white epoxy and tried to make it look as natural as I could. There are different techniques for making waves, but I tried to make them look the best I could. To give the motion of the wave, make it look like it was moving, you can take a torch or the heat gun and move the epoxy around. If you stay on the beach side and try to blow the wave out toward the sea, it has more of a natural wave effect. After that last coat of epoxy has dried, it's time to put another layer on. You can still tint it blue if you want, a lighter blue, or you can just go with just clear. As my layers progressed, I went with just the clear, but I went ahead and put another layer of waves on with each layer of epoxy. As the different layers progressed, you can kind of see how it was beginning to come together. I did find out that sand by itself didn't really make a good beach, so the pebbles that looks like small gravel for the fish aquariums, Turned out that worked the best to make my beach out of. So this is after we've taken the molds off. Just FYI, anytime you mark on the back on your paper here, it's going to come off. The epoxy is going to pick it up. I did not realize that. I wrote down some comfort information here, so one of the grandkids will be happy. They need some work, but they just come out. Got them all undone. These are going to have a little bit different clock in them. But anyway, I'm going to clean these up a little bit and we'll see what we can do for sanding on them. Alright. As you can see, the edges were a little rough. Couldn't really see through them, so after I sanded them down, I put one final thin coat of epoxy on the whole thing, especially on the edges, and it made it look like glass. It took all the blemishes away. I made a wider base for these to sit on, made them a lot more steady sitting up on their own. On 7 of the clocks, I put the numbers in one of the layers of epoxy, and 2 of the clocks I made a little bit differently, you'll see. But after everything was dried and the thickness I needed, it was time to get ready to put the clockworks in. So the first step was to find the middle and drill a hole for the hands to come through. On the back side, where the clockworks are mounted in the clock, I used a router to remove the epoxy to make room for it. Some of the clock pieces that I got had a chime that came with it. I was able to mount some of them, one of them inside the back of it, just like the clockworks. And a couple of them I had to mount on the outside, use some double-sided tape to secure it in place. On a couple of them, after I routed out for the clockworks, from the front side you could easily see all the way through it because I had routed out my collar of the ocean. So quick spray paint from the back side, and that took care of it. You couldn't see the clockwork after that. One of the pictures when I routed through the back to make room for the clock itself, the router bit came through the picture itself, so I didn't catch it in time. I should have got a clockworks with a deeper shaft for the hands. That would have taken care of my problem on this one, but food for thought. If you decide to make something like that, you might think of that. On the last 2 clocks, I got a couple clock inserts and put them in from the front side, routed the hole and set them in. So different options that you have, whatever you like. kind of interesting to look at the different levels from the side on these. Really looks unique. I hope you enjoyed the video on how I made these. Hopefully you can get some ideas for yourself. They really made a great gift for the kids and grandkids, and they have a nice keepsake now for themselves forever. Thanks for watching. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please do so and hit that bell so you know the next time we have a video out. Thanks for watching. Bye.